Hey there, I am back with another deck review, and today we're going to look at Gold Certificate, the March deck in the King's Wild Shorts line. Now, King's Wild Shorts is the monthly subscription service from Jackson Robinson and King's Wild Project, and they always do some of the most inspired and unique decks. Every single month, subscribers have a chance to venture into the mind of Jackson Robinson and see what deck he comes up with. But lately, Jackson's been going away from completely original designs and giving us some remakes of some of his older decks. This is the third deck in the year that's been a remake of one of his originals. We had the Sherlock Holmes deck in January, then the Federal 52 in February, and now we have the March deck Gold Certificate. Gold Certificate is, in addition to the Federal 52 deck, one of the decks from his very first Kickstarter campaign back in 2014. He released Federal 52 and Gold Certificate as a pair on that highly successful campaign, and he's reprising that deck here in 2021. It's cool, I think, in that it gives new collectors a chance to see one of these decks that really has gotten so expensive and hard to find that most people won't be able to get their hands on it. That said, I do look forward to King's Wild getting back to some of the more original designs, and that's definitely planned for later in the year. So I'll be excited to get back into those, but I never got a hold of a Gold Certificate deck, so excited to check this one out myself. So let's get right into it. All right, so Gold Certificate, just like Federal 52, is inspired by US currency. And it goes into a really cool and interesting part of US history when the US was bound by the gold standard. What that essentially meant was that currency was actually backed by gold. There was physical gold somewhere that you had right to. And so these gold certificates were issued, and they entitled you to go somewhere and get a specific quantity of gold. The gold certificates were in use from about 1863 until the US got off of the gold standard in 1933, at which point the gold certificates were actually made illegal. It was illegal to own them. So not many of them survived. They were finally made legal again in 1964, specifically for collectors, but you don't see many of these beautiful and distinctive notes around anymore. The notes look a lot like standard US currency, but several of them were marked with brilliant orange color that gave them this really distinctive look. So that's the inspiration behind this deck. Really cool stories behind them, and that orange color is really brought forward as you get into the tuck case. Done on a matte cardstock, bright orange color, not a color you see often in decks. Honestly, not my favorite color in the world, but looks nice on this one. And the only other color is given in this orange foil. So you get orange foil on the matte stock. The only exception to the matte finish is this one reflective or sort of shiny bar that extends all the way around. It gives a little bit of an accent to that, and it's on that bar that you have in gold foil embossed Gold Certificate, the name of the deck. Very small letters, very minimalistic feel. Has by Jackson Robinson at the bottom, finishes with that orange foiled border. Really nice sort of bespoke look to the whole thing, and it's a nice pairing with last month's deck, Federal 52, done in exactly the same style. So you have the green and the orange, very much a consistent feel between them. On the sides, you just have 52 written on one side and on the other. Bottom here has your ad copy for King's Wild Project and expert playing cards who printed the deck. Top just says Gold Certificate, and the back's almost completely blank, just that shiny stripe, and then the border around the edge in that orange foil. You can see the 52 on the inner flap peeking out, and that's really the only printing on the inner flap. And then you get Jackson Robinson's signature number 13 on the smaller inner flaps. Nothing printed on the interior of the tuck case. So very clean look to it overall. I like it. The original deck had a lot more ornate design on that, but I do like the finish on this one as well. So that's the tuck case, but let's look at the cards. Now, if you have the original Gold Certificate deck, or if you've seen it before, you'll see a lot of familiar elements on this. In large part, this one is just like the original deck, but just like a lot of recent Jackson Robinson decks, it's really been given that foil treatment. You see foil on all of his decks now, and he really kicked it up on this one. The back design is just like the original, but it's completely redone in this bright orange foil. There's a little bit of overprinting that gives some slight variations in the color, but it's a really brilliant and shiny look to it overall. As I tilt in the light, you can really see just how much that glows. Lots of details in here. In all honesty, the foil makes it a little bit harder to get to those details. Depending on the light, you may be kind of blinded by just the brightness coming off of that. But as you get in close, you can really see some of those fine details inspired by the engraving that you'd see on actual bills. Lots of swirling lines, the Kingswild emblem, lots of fine details, and then the banners at the top with the Latin phrase supra cetera, which means above all else. Small 52 at the top, and then finishes out with this off-white colored border in beige. So really nice look to it overall. Very striking design. Maybe not the most functional, but one that's going to stand out and you're going to really love if you get this in hand. All right, now we get into the cards themselves, and we'll start with the extra cards. Now, surprisingly, these are not the two extra cards that you would find in the original gold certificate deck. Instead, he pulled forward the exact same extra cards that you'll find in Federal 52. Bit of an odd choice. The original gold certificate actually, while it had a lot of the same cards as Federal 52, it did have different jokers. I wish he'd used the original jokers, but he went with the same two jokers that you'll find from Federal 52. They are, though, inspired with beautiful artwork that comes from currency. So there's what he calls a more masculine joker with the bald eagle on this one. This bald eagle actually comes from an 1861 $50 interest note. And it's accented with lots of foil, just like the back design. Lots of gold pops in this one, highlighted all the way through, but the beautiful illustration of the eagle. And you can even see the little card reveal. I think that's a 3 of spades, maybe a 3 of diamonds in his mouth there, glowing in gold. You have the little banners in the corner with the US, very much the feel of currency, but that foil really amps it up overall. So nicely done on that joker. The other joker is his more feminine joker. This is Lady Electricity. It actually comes from a Series 1896 educational note. The US put out these educational notes that celebrated different parts of the sciences, and Lady Electricity was actually pictured or depicted holding a light bulb in her hand, but for the card, she's actually depicted holding an ace of spades in her hand, so a second reveal on this one. Again, really great use of the gold foil. I will say, if you contrast this one to the Federal 52 deck, that one used a kind of darker green foil. I think the gold foil is a much nicer look to this overall. By the way, another interesting touch, if you look at the background, it looks like it's sort of this off-white, but as you get in close, let me see if I can get a nice zoom in here. You'll see these little kind of red and blue or orange and blue threads in here. That's actually a security feature that was on the paper of a lot of the decks. You'd see these little threads that were woven into the actual paper. Just another thing that would deter counterfeiters. So nice touch to add on these as the background on all the cards. All right, so there are the two jokers. The 4 aces are all the same as we saw in the Federal 52 deck, other than sort of the change of that background with the security threads. Again, a little bit of a surprise. The original gold certificate deck actually had a different ace of spades than the Federal 52, but Jackson brought forward the same ace of spades from Federal 52 instead. That said, these aces are beautifully done, pulling in lots of elements, these little swirls and details around the side, pulled in direct from US currency. You have the banners at the top with ace of spades, the ace in the center, and then even little tiny touches that you'll see on actual currency. For example, you'll see the series here. Of course, this is series 2021 when the deck was printed. You have Jackson's signature there as the treasurer of Kingswild, and you even have a little serial number. Fun fact, the serial numbers are actually significant dates in Jackson Robinson's life. Not going to say what all the dates are, but each one of them represents a different date for him. You have that large spade pip in the center, and it's all accented, just like everything else, with brilliant gold foil. Pretty classic pip and index in the corner, nice and easily readable. Small details like the line down the side that just give it a little extra framing, but nice, easily readable. The other 3 aces are similarly styled. You'll see a little bit of change, obviously, with the red for the red cards, but lots of beautiful details on all 4 aces. Custom pips in the center, just beautifully done. This heart with all that detailing in the center, probably my favorite of the bunch. So there's your 4 aces. And then we get into the number cards. And the number cards, by the standards of the rest of the deck, definitely subdue a little bit of the custom elements, but that doesn't mean they're ordinary by any means. You get this beautiful watermark in the background. Each one of the suits is going to get its own watermark, done in beautiful engraving style with the orange King's Wild emblem in the center and this blue ring around the edge. And then you get classic pips, but they're outlined in gold foil. So continuing the gold foil all throughout the deck. Number cards, otherwise the pips against that watermark are pretty classic layout. Nothing too out of the ordinary on these. And then you get to the red cards, you'll see the watermark changes out. And of course you get kind of that crimson red lined with gold on the pips. And then into the clubs. Again, really nicely done. I like the club-shaped watermark on this one. And finally, into the hearts. All right, so great job on the number cards. Now let's get into the quartz. Now, if you saw Federal 52, you've seen a lot of the design on these quartz. They're definitely brightened up a little bit with the use of gold foil, which really shines on this, but still a little bit of a dark feel to these. That said, beautiful artwork as you get in close on these. Each one of these two-way quartz at first glance has a little bit of the pose of like your classic court cards, but they all feature different people from actual US currency. Each one of these is distinct, unique, and beautiful. The currency for each one, there was a card in the original that explained who each one of them was, but they're given that beautiful mix of both currency and the pose that kind of makes them reminiscent of a classic playing card. But we'll go through who's on each of these. So the Jack of Clubs here, or Jack of Spades here, this is Grover Cleveland. There was actually a $1,000 note, not something a lot of people have seen, but he appeared on a Series 1928 $1,000 note. I love the whimsical touches like the handlebar mustache that was not something that Grover Cleveland had, but nice little addition to make them fit in with the court cards. So like the gold foil on this one, definitely a little bit of a dark feel, but that gold foil, especially compared to last month's dark green foil, definitely gives it a little bit brighter of a look overall. The Jack of Diamonds, this one is Thomas Jefferson, comes from a 1918 $2 note. There's old Thomas Jefferson. And then we get to the Jack of Clubs. You're looking at Ulysses S. Grant from a 2004 $50 note. And the Jack of Hearts, this one is James Garfield from a Series 1882 $5 note. Definitely a bit of a smaller look to his head overall. But you'll see, again, I love the little elements like the feather in his hand, keeping it in line with classic quartz, but then bringing in those elements of currency. Beautiful borders, beautiful use of that gold foil. All right, the queens were actually a really tricky one. There aren't many female characters that are featured on US currency, so Jackson had to dig a little bit to find some characters for these. But the Queen of Spades, this one's a little bit more common. This is Lady Liberty. You'll see her in a lot of coins, different bills all throughout. This particular depiction comes from an 1874 $50 note that Lady Liberty appeared on. So there is Lady Liberty, a bit of a fictional character, but a famous one in US money. And then the Queen of Diamonds here. This one's an unknown character, but it comes from a 5-cent military payment, Series 541. So back when military was paid, they would be paid in these bills. And so this unknown character appeared on one of those bills. Beautiful depiction there. Love all of the detailing. I'm just going to get in really close so you can see just some of those engraving details on the face and all throughout. So really love the artwork that was on these. And then we get to the Queen of Clubs. Famous character, but not one that people know from currency. This is Martha Washington. A lot of people know that George Washington appeared on $1 bills, but Martha Washington actually appeared on an 1896 $1 note. So she gets a place on the Queen of Clubs. And last but not least is the Queen of Hearts, another unknown character. This was from a 1961 military payment certificate. So another one from a military payment certificate. Interesting, this one has a lot more white space around it compared to some of the other cards. All right, then we get to the Kings, and these are some of the most prominent characters of all from U.S. currency, starting with one who was not a president, but the first treasurer of the U.S. This is Alexander Hamilton from the $10 note. Now, the Kings are all given the addition of this little banner here. You'll see Rex Legones, which means King of Spades in Latin. Nice little touch. I love the banners on these. Rex Adamas, or King of Diamonds. This one is Benjamin Franklin, who appears on the $100 bill. And then the King of Clubs, or Rex Fustibus. This is George Washington. We saw his wife was featured in the dollar bill, but more well known, of course, is George Washington, who appears on $1 bills today. And he's given that fancy little mustache that he did not have, but maybe he should have. That's a pretty epic look. And last but not least is the King of Hearts. This is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, as we all know, appears on the $5 note. So this is from a 2006 $5 note. Interestingly, and I think this was an error in the printing, you'll see there's no banner on this, just like the others all had that banner with their Latin name. King of Hearts, though, is missing the banner. The original deck did have the banner, appears to have been removed here. I'm assuming that was just a little bit of a mistake, a little bit of an unfortunate one. But that's it. That is the deck. Really beautifully done. I would, love this as a display piece. I think it's just really beautifully done. As far as handling, these are definitely on a thicker stock. If you felt some of the previous Kings Wild decks, you'll be familiar with the fact that Jackson's been playing around with stock and foiling from Expert, and he's been using a much thicker stock. That said, this is a good bit thinner than some of his previous decks, and it handles a lot better too. I gotta say, the fanning is really smooth, cuts really nicely. Definitely still a little bit on the stiff side, but I can see tons of improvements in the stock from some of the previous decks. So kudos to Jackson as he continues to refine the stock on this. That said, uses this deck, I'm still not going to call this a cardistry deck. This is a collector's art deck above all else. It's just so custom and hard to use, I think, for gameplay, magic, cardistry, any really functional purpose. It's an art deck that you'll just love to appreciate. That's it. That is the gold certificate deck. Now, this is the standard version of the deck. I actually get two different versions of the deck. I get the limited as well. Limited has the exact same cards inside, but you'll see the differences on the tuck case. So this one's given a brown tuck case with the same orange foil, a little bit of a different combination. Everything else is the same other than the addition of the sticker on the back, which denotes this as number 265 out of the 600 deck edition. So that's the limited version. There's also a gilded. Those actually haven't been sent out yet. I don't actually get the gilded subscription, so I just have these two to share with you. Overall with the deck, I think a great job on it. I'm looking forward to Shorts getting back to more original decks, though. I think the remakes are interesting, but I really want to see it get back to some of the originals. And honestly, I was a little bit disappointed with a couple of the design decisions that were made, particularly bringing the Jokers from the Federal 52 deck and the Ace of Spades from that one, as opposed to using the ones that were originally in the gold certificate deck. In the spirit of celebrating the original, I really would have loved to see remakes of those original cards rather than the ones from Federal 52. That said, still a beautiful deck, one that I'm sure people are going to love to have in their collection. And stay tuned on Kings Wild Project if you want to pick one of these up. The standard ones, at least, will be available on his site soon. So that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed this look at Gold Certificate from Kings Wild Shorts. Make sure to subscribe for more deck reviews and unboxings. Let me know what else you want to see, and I'll see you for the next one.